The next CSS property which we're going to learn about is line height. And a lot of these properties do exactly what their names say they do. So when you're first introduced to them, you might be like, what does line height do? And later you might be like, oh yeah, what is that CSS tag that adjusts the space between the lines? But line height will give you space between different lines of text. So that's what line height does. And when we talked about kerning and leading, we said one is for the space between characters and the other one is for the space between lines. So a little quiz question, which one was for the space between lines? All right, pause the video, answer it. You got it? All right. So the space between lines is leading. Space between characters is kerning. Earlier I think I had letters and lines. It's easier to remember it if it's kerning and characters because those both start with a K sound. And leading and line both start with an L. All right, so there you go. Leading, line, kerning, characters. Mnemonic devices, they help. All right, so we're going to look at some line height examples. So here I have 07 line height, 01, and I'm just going to open the first group of files together and right-click it and split vertically. And when you see a border like hot pink, for me that's just debugging so I could kind of see what's happening there. And we have font family, font size, font weight, font variant, line height. And so when I look at this, not that one, this one right here, there's my line height. So put some space between my lines. I could go line height normal, and that's what it looks like normally, or I could do like 1, and that's what it looks like. So basically with line height, you're just putting in a number here. So I could do 1.5, and that's what 1.5 looks like. So a number allows you to adjust the space between your lines. If you look at the documentation, it's good to learn how to read documentation, right? Here's the summary, here's the syntax, here are the different values that this CSS property takes. So CSS properties take values. And you can see you can put in the keyword normal, and it's roughly 1.2 is normal. You could put in a number. That's what we've just been putting in. You could put in a length. So this is that CSS data type, right? So if you go here and you look, it says this is a CSS data type, not a property, not a value, it's a data type. And you could do M, rem, VW, right? Any of these pixel, any of these data types. We're sticking with rem and VW because there's a lot of data types. And there'll be a few places where we use them different, but we'll learn about that then. And you could also, so that's a length, you could also use a percentage. So that's just reading the documentation, figuring out which values this property, which is line height, which values this property takes, right? And then the other thing about reading the documentation is just read the summary description. On block level elements, the line height property specifies the minimum height of line boxes within the element. Well, what's a line box? So basically, it's a really weird way of saying the space between lines. But I put together a little example to kind of illustrate line boxes. And so right here, line box, just in case you read that, you're like, what is a line box? Which is what I asked myself the first time I read that. And everything on a web page is a box. And so, you know, within HTML, everything is laid out using a box. And so here you can see I put a box around all of the lines. So each line is within a box too. And as I adjust line height, it's adjusting the space between these line boxes. So that's what a line box is. The last thing I want to point out about line height, I realized I was kind of droning there, so I needed to change my cadence. The last thing I want to point out about line height is right here, it's also used to center things vertically. So this could be a little bit hacky. We're going to learn a much better technique for vertical centering soon, which you will use all the time instead of this. But you might see this somewhere where the height of an object, right, or an element, here's the div, the height of that div, there's the div, is 200 pixels. I've set my line height exactly the same. Well, the text box is going to end up in the center of the line height. That's just the way it works. And I'm going to center it horizontally. And so this will put it vertically and horizontally in the center. Vertically and horizontally in the center. Bit of a hack. You might see it. It's good to know about, but we're going to learn a much better way to vertically center when we learn Flexbox, which is coming up. All right, so that's line height.